Hello, we are here again for Chapter 5, Sovereign Debt Crisis and the Ramifications for International Banking. In this chapter, we will see the topics Sovereign Debt Crisis from 1980s to present, their causes and their ramifications for international banking. Since 1850, most sovereign defaults have occurred because a defaulting government's past policies left it will kesebiliriz. Çok pardon. Çünkü ekranı göremedim. Pardon. Özür dilerim. Tamam. Evet. Hello. We are here again for Chapter 5, the Sovereign Debt Crisis and International Banking. In this chapter, we will see the topics under Sovereign Debt Crisis from 1980s to present, their causes and their ramifications for international banking. Since 1815, most sovereign defaults have occurred because a defaulting government's past policies left it well prepared to face an unexpected turn of events, in other words, a shock. War, regime change, other forms of political instability, and sharp deterioration in terms of trade are examples of shocks. From Bretton Woods and the creation of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, in 1944, that we see in Chapter 1, until the 1970s, the assumption was that sovereign states could regenerate their loans, receive temporary external emergency support, and therefore avoid default. In 2005, following the Argentina's 2001 unilateral default on foreign debt owed to both private sector and multilateral agencies, the Executive Board of the IMF conducted a review of sovereign debt restructuring in order to understand the determinants of and prospects for regaining access to markets following a crisis. In February 2012, Greece successfully launched the largest sovereign debt restructuring in history with 205 billion euros. However, as of 2013, ongoing legislation against Argentina calls into question the legal robustness of sovereign debt restructurings. In 2013, the IMF has an examination for the Executive Board concluded that the sovereign debt restructurings are often too little, too late, with delays caused by the difficulty in introducing early resolution and fear of contagion. Creditor participation in recent preemptive, that is prior to default, debt restructurings, the current market-based approach has not proven to be sufficiently robust to overcome collective action problems, as evidenced by the ongoing Argentine litigation. The changing composition of official lending calls for a clearer framework for official sector involvement, and since lending in areas to the country emerging from a sovereign debt crisis remains the most promising way for it to regain market access post-default, consideration should be given to extending the lending in areas policy to official areas. The 1980s Latin America debt crisis. The 1980s Latin American debt crisis was the first sovereign debt crisis to challenge the orderly resolution framework conceived under the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference, which heralded the establishment of the IMF. It also set the stage for Basel I, that we will just analyze them in Chapter 6, the first international accord on bank regulation reached in 1988. For the Latin American debt crisis, you can also analyze the Mexico in 1982. And there they have the Brady plan for the crisis resolution. And the Brady plan offered creditors many of the choices. You can read them on page 117. In 1997, Asian currency crisis occurred. The Asian crisis of the late 1990s followed the general pattern of previous sovereign debt crises. Great optimism by lenders and borrowers, in this case by the mid-1990s, convinced of the East Asian miracle that was seen as capable of delivering rapid economic growth over an extended period, significant foreign capital inflows, rapid increases in asset prices, especially in the real estate sector, and the reversal of all the above as economic growth slows down and corporate and financial balance sheets began to deteriorate. For Asian crisis, also you can just have a look at for the Asian 5 countries, which are included as Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. And also the trigger and resolution written in the book details. In 1998, the Russian sovereign debt crisis occurred. What are the causes of the crisis? The government had difficulty in managing its finances after the breakup in 1991 from Soviet Union. A combination of increasing debt and fall in commodity prices, major source of Russian revenue and foreign exchange in 1997. The Asian crisis also affected Russia. Political changes by the president. June 1998, the trade imbalances and the delay by the IMF to grant Russia the loan. You can read the details from the book, and you are supposed to also just arrange the assignment for the crisis. In 2002, a still unresolved sovereign default for Argentina. In January 2002, President Duhalde announced a moratorium on all Argentina's sovereign debt, including monies due to the IMF, the World Bank, and the Paris Club. This sovereign default imposed losses in excess of 75% of principal on private foreign creditors. In July 2014, a U.S. court ruled that Argentina must repay those hedge fund debt holders who had rejected the previous debt restructuring, in effect bringing about a second default. As of end August 2014, this remains unresolved. The lessons learned by all sovereign governments, the IMF, and other multilateral agencies and private sector investors helped shape the handling of Greece's sovereign debt crisis in 2010. The European Union sovereign debt crisis that was held between 2010 and 12. The Eurozone sovereign debt and banking crisis represented a unique case directly related to the structure of the European Economic and Monetary Union. For the first time in history, sovereign countries with mature economies and stable democratic regimes suffered cross-border contagion directly correlated to their dependency on one central bank, the European Central Bank, one monetary policy, and for the 17 member countries of the European Monetary Union or Eurozone, within the 28-member European Union, one currency and euro. So this was affected all of the European region, in fact. So the Greek crisis, which is the one that was really a big one, just on page 128, it was all written as the catalysts. You can read it there. The Ireland, also one of an exceptional dip in banking crisis. Spain is the other one, Spain's Bankia, and the second stage of the European Currency Bank rescue. And you can all read all of these ones. And if we will summarize chapter 5, the most recent sovereign debt crisis coming in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis differ from previous crises in two important aspects. First, they affected OECD economies considered to have in place strong governance and regulatory structures. Second, they brought to the surface the dangerous interlinkages for developed economies also between sovereign risk and the health of domestic financial systems. Please also see Mexico in 1995, Turkey in 2001, Argentina in 2002, Greece in 2009, and Spain in 2012. Also, you can analyze the Iceland in 2008, Ireland in 2008, and Cyprus in 2012. See Nordic countries in 1991, Japan in 1995, Republic of Korea in 1997, and the United States in 2008. Thank you.